For those of you that don't know, my name is Ethan. Today we're going over a new hadrosaur discovery in North America. We're also going to take a look at different species of other dinosaurs. So, from Sci News, dinosaurs may have fed their young a special diet, study suggests. An analysis of where on the fossilized teeth of the hadrosaurian dinosaur Maiasaura pueblosaurus indicates their juveniles may have eaten softer, more nutritious food than adults, hinting at advanced parental care among dinosaurs. Even though it's not surprising for somebody like me to see that at least other paleontologists have found evidence of the different types of diets that would have occurred throughout an animal's lifetime. This is usually something that's heard of or seen more in different species of prehistoric or large prehistoric mammals later in the corresponding Cenozoic era. But this is during the Mesozoic, and it's still quite an astonishing, like fascinating announcement for something like this to occur. So we have evidence looking at their teeth of simply the different types of feeding behavior these animals would have had over time. So we're looking at a new, or not a new species. This animal was found back in the late 1900s, or somewhere between 1960s and 1970s. This is Maiasaura, which is a species of hadrosaur, and specifically a member of the Saurolophinae hadrosaur lineage from the late Cretaceous of Alberta, Canada, and as well as Montana. And this is also one of the few species of dinosaurs in which we have found many nests of this animal. Actually, let's look up other pictures of Maiasaura. This seems to be a representation of the herbivore from possibly the 1980s. It could be a recent drawing, but um, I would say it's not overall bad. I think maybe the hind legs are a bit off. Might be a little tall for its body size. Maybe it just has small forelimbs. Maisaura. Did I spell that wrong?
Is it MAIAS?
Yes. So this is a 30-foot long or 9-meter 3-ton hadrosaur from about 75 million years ago over in Montana. And it looks like we have found somewhere around 200 to 220 nests of this animal over in a specific formation over in Montana. We have not found any nests of Maiasaura over in corresponding Alberta, considering Alberta is just north of Montana. British Columbia, just west of not Montana, northwest of Montana, but west of Alberta, is rare to find dinosaurs in general. It can occur, but it's just simply due to many of the geological layers that are present within British Columbia.
What's with the face on this guy?
So it's okay. When looking at this older representation of a Maiasaura, this is probably one from the 1970s. It could be the 1980s. It looks a little too, I'd say, defined, at least in the overall representation of the animal for a prior date, but probably because also many depictions, for some reason, in the 1960s of different species of dinosaurs were quite funky, or at least they were very out of proportion and almost as if, in many cases, the artists weren't really um, or the paleo artists at the time weren't striving for a it's I guess a very appealing representation for an animal. Almost like a lot of cartoonish dinosaurs were appearing, which is odd considering you had it in the 1950s and 1940s where certain depictions of different dinosaurs, especially of the more famous individuals like Brontosaurus, T Rex, Triceratops, were actually quite decent for the time and had a very lively sort of landscape sort of appearance, especially if you're looking at like Charles Knight depictions. But this animal, or this specific picture, I have seen this before, but I think the snout or the overall skull of the Maiasaura is a bit too thin. I think there should be more height towards the upper jaw Even the bottom jaw, I think, is a bit lacking. Even though hadrosaurs in general didn't necessarily have very large bottom jaws, or I guess there wasn't much width, this seems a bit low. But for the time, was a decent Maiasaura. In fact, when you look at the hind limbs, I think they are decently well proportioned when it comes to the leanness of the musculature of the calves and the thighs.
Somebody just told you thank you for teaching about dinosaurs because but I can't pronounce the name. It's Kia Pig Pig. I cannot pronounce that.
Now, let's see. When it comes to the eye socket of this animal, I think it looks decent for a Maiasaura. When it comes to the earlobe, it might be a bit large. It looks huge. There were certain species of dinosaurs, and when looking at the herbivores, that probably did have quite large ear sockets compared to other species, but there's something about this specific individual, it just seems a bit large. The nostril might be a bit long as well. I think it also should be a bit further towards the tip of the beak of this animal. Some might call it a bill. Um, I'm not sure if Maiasaur, at least not hitting me at the moment. Maybe we should look up a skeleton, or maybe just another representation. It's not
Hold
hitting me
on,
at the
there's more.
moment. What?
There's more.
Oh. Um, Whether or not Maiasaura was that specific species or was one of the hadrosaurs where the duck bill and quote would extend towards the or at least point towards the ground. Well, it seems to be in this skeleton, so it could be. That's so this probably is off for that specific drawing. But besides that, I mean, I say the skull's quite a bit off, but the rest of that representation, it really isn't bad. Let's see. Hadrosaurs, they're interesting when it comes to especially their leg anatomy. The shin bone is close to the length of the thigh bone, though it might be slightly longer. So, when referring to the tibia, which is the shin, versus the femur bone or the thigh, the ankle bones are also not exactly short compared to many lineages of herbivorous dinosaurs. In fact, they're quite long. So the hadrosaurs were definitely capable of running to a certain extent. Definitely, probably not as fast as certain species of carnivores, but possibly just fast enough to outrun dinosaurs like T Rex. The question is, well, okay, when this animal existed, there were much more slenderly built species of tyrannosaurs like Daspletosaurus, Albertosaurus. Probably, especially when Maiasaura was around, it was Albertosaurus that was the apex predator. Albertosaurus is not usually mentioned being known for existing in Montana, but it has been found in quite abundance over in Alberta, especially from the Horseshoe Canyon Formation and the Dinosaur Park Formation over in Alberta. But in fact, let's look him up. But
Who?
Albertosaurus, so Alberta Saurus. Yeah, also, when it comes to hadrosaurs like Maiasaura, it's one of the first species of dinosaurs that we found like massive amounts of evidence from all these nests that we've discovered over in Montana. It's not the only hadrosaur for this to occur. Okay, well, this is Albertosaurus. Wow, this is a definitely a much more recent depiction. This is a thick Albertosaurus. Usually, Albertosaurus is got this. It has this sleek, sort of lean type of appearance to it. I mean, compared to many representations of T Rex or Tarbosaurus, you could say that one does somewhat. That's more approaching Tarbosaurus. This seems to be a bit of an older representation, probably early 2010s. Could be older.
But I have an older one.
That's definitely like 1970s, I'm guessing. It could be older, though it could be one of the goofy ones from the 1980s. I'd say 1970s, 1980s, depending on who's um, drawing the animals, are fairly similar. But then there are certain depictions of the animals that you can see that there's a very big step in the overall depiction of these animals, especially from paleontologist Dr. Robert T. Bacher from his book, The Dinosaur Heresies in 1986. And he was giving the animals a much more lively, active, sleek sort of a persona to themselves. Even the large sauropods like Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus were given much more just mobile sort of depictions. Okay, this Albertosaurus, it's better in my opinion, at least compared to that last one. But the first picture, at least comparing it to this individual, they are covering it with feathers. It's possible that adult Albertosaurus likely had feathers. They were probably smaller. I think that one might have been lacking a bit of muscle over on the tail, however. This one looks this now that's an Allosaurus. It's still off for an Allosaurus. Like I'd say, the neck might be a bit too muscular. Not that Allosaurus wouldn't have had a muscular neck, but it's it was one of the reasons to why it doesn't necessarily have a very strong bite force is due to also not having very puffy neck,
Okay, this
but
is funny.
also the face a bit short. I don't mind the overall okay, I'll be honest, it is a bit off. Let's see. Okay. Salbertosaurus. Okay, this is a bit of an older depiction, I guess like early 2000s. I guess from the angle, this is probably supposed to represent a bit more of a sleek version. I think there might be a bit of muscle lacking on the tail, but also from the angle, it might just still look like that. I still think it would be a bit wider.
I have a really
Um,
old one. There, he's very old.
I don't think that's an Albertosaurus.
Says it.
Albertosaurus has distinct horn-like structures on top of its eye socket, different, but sort of like with what you see in different species of Allosaurs, but very distinct for a species of Tyrannosaur. Who is this? Is it like Electrosaurus? Is it possibly a Gorgosaurus? Something tells me it's not even Gorgosaurus. This is some older species of Tyrannosaur. It's
It's
definitely
under Albertosaur, though. Even
maybe it's a younger individual, but even then, I would still expect to see horn-like structures towards the front of its eye sockets. Um,
well, what are we looking at here?
well, most tyrannosaurs in general, those are technically horn-like structures, would have had a slight like area of bone that would have protruded just before the eyes, but this is not an Albertosaurus overall physique for the skull.
You're referencing this.
Yeah, and this is an Allosaurus. Got that walking with dinosaurs sort of
They really
coloration.
they really can't get things right on here.
You can see the 3 claws. Its tongue should not be sticking out in the air. No dinosaur had that ability, not even the marine reptiles. Um, let's see. I guess we should also we should probably also head back towards the article. Yeah, it's a big question still as to how specifically they were taking care of their young, um, especially in the first stages of their life. When it came to the youngsters. But by more evidence recently, it seems that they were immediately also supplementally feeding their youngsters too. Maiasaura pubilosaurus is a duck-billed dinosaur species that roamed our planet about 75 to 80 million years ago. Maiasaur is odd because it's possible it might have existed as early as some of the first species, true species of Hadrosauridae, so pushing 81 to 82 million years ago and then mysteriously going extinct around 71 million years ago. So it's possible Maiasaur just was a very successful species existing during the whole Campanian stage. Well, I wouldn't say the whole Campanian, but most Campanian stage of the Cretaceous, and then on to the first couple million years of the Maastrichtian stage of the Cretaceous. First discovered in Montana, these large herbivorous dinosaurs lived in herds and were thought to have been highly social creatures, especially in contrast to those that may have had different reproductive strategies. Um, Well, I guess if we're referring to the ceratopsians or the family of horned dinosaurs, which would have consisted of animals at the time like Cosmoceratops, Diabloceratops, Nossoceratops. Let's see. I guess we could probably bring in a species of ceratopsian. So let's look up Nossoceratops. Oh, Nausoceratops. So Nossoceratops is an odd species of centrosaur from the Cretaceous of Canada and as well, I believe, the north central United States, or at least towards the northern continental divide of the Rocky Mountains today. So specifically, areas of Montana, it might have roamed different regions of Wyoming, South Dakota. But Nossoceratops was likely living in the swamps and wetlands of these regions. This was a quite a distant relative of the later Triceratops that would evolve towards the end of the Cretaceous. Nossoceratops was somewhere around 20 to 22 feet in length. You're pushing around 6 to 6.8 meters and probably weighed somewhere around 2.5 to 3 tons, and was definitely a much harder target for the different species of tyrannosaurs and even the dromaeosaurs that might have hunted its youngsters, or just overall young back in late Cretaceous Montana. So, Nosiceratops, it's also what makes it very distinct. Not necessarily the frill, but the frill is smaller even compared to its body size, unlike more famous relatives like Triceratops and Torosaurus. It's actually even compared to true centrosaurs because Triceratops and Torosaurus were members of the Chasmosaur lineage of ceratopsians. Ooh, yeah, that's a good picture. It definitely added a lot more width to the horns in general. It evolved horns like those of the orcs or many different breeds of cows today, which is quite interesting. It's like this sort of um, somewhat convergent, like morphological or physiological evolution when it comes to specifically the horns.
Okay, this looks like a massive frill difference.
Oh yeah, I've seen this. Yeah, I think it's also the term's not stiff, it's just less,
Oh, it's
I guess.
longer.
Yeah, somewhat. I guess a bit more sturdy to an extent, but also it seems more brittle at the same time. The horns are definitely shorter on these individuals. Now, you could have had it where you might have had different subspecies of the different, like single species of dinosaurs in different regions. Like per se, you would have had Nasutoceratops in different regions of North America that might have had different physiological traits. So you could have had it where maybe the horns had less width on certain individuals compared to others, though it also might just simply be due to a certain genetic deficiency, maybe due to lack of nutrition when the mother was going through gestation or not as I guess you could say creating the eggs inside of her, and maybe she didn't receive enough beneficial nutrition for those young that she would have laid the eggs of to create or form those specific wide horns. But that's also just specifically. Um, Could be a subspecies trait. Where was I going at with this? Oh yeah. This is also an odd specific species because not just of the specific curvature of the horns and um I guess also that distinct bony structure in the middle. It's not really something that you see in other species of ceratopsians.
Well, I was gonna ask you, were they trying to stop poaching here?
Oh yeah.
Eh,
it's it's a it, the joke is that they do this to rhinos today with dehorning. They don't take off like they don't cut all the way to the root, but just enough to where it doesn't hurt the animal really physically, and it can grow back almost to full length in the next 2 to 3 years. The problem is animals like where it becomes the rhino becomes less appealing to people. I mean, that's a good thing. However, lions look at them and go, "Oh, you look like an easy target." especially if it's a calf. There was an incident in the past few days over in the Masai Mara Game Reserve. The calf survived. He was still with his mother. It's just two male lions. Anyway, what happened? Oh, okay. So specifically, this ceratopsian has a very odd sort of almost like proto-ceratopsid um like morphology around the tip of its snout. It has like an odd sort of a horn stump, which is not really going to protect itself against any larger predatory animals. I mean, you could say it could still, bump the animal or the tyrannosaur in the instance, but um yeah, I don't know really what that would be used for. Now, here's the thing. Ceratopsians had some of the most robust beaks of any species of or group of dinosaurs to exist. In fact, probably had the most robust beaks. So it's likely not just could they use their horns for a defense mechanism, they could bite off like chunks of flesh off of the predator if they wanted to, or as for another defense mechanism. Okay, let's head back to the article. So this would have been a probably a neighbor to Maiasaura. And no, we have not found any nests when it comes to the different species of ceratopsians. In fact, well, let me rephrase that. That's not true. The larger species of ceratopsians, only a couple of species of ceratopsians, and I'm referring to small species such as Protoceratops and Psittacosaurus, have we found the nests of. Extensive fossil findings. So back to the article. Preserved Maiasaura Peoplesorum nests have since made them a key species for understanding the reproductive behaviors and ecology of many other types of duckbill dinosaurs. I mean, definitely seeing these nests of this specific species, I would assume would give a major help in understanding how even the other species would have reproduced. Despite being different species and they're all going to have their distinct sort of behaviors, it's going to be similar to an extent. So, in the new study, Ohio State University's Dr. John Hunter and Dr. Christine Janis from the University of Bristol and Brown University found that the teeth of juvenile Maiasaura peoplesorum showed significantly more crushing wear, while adults exhibited more shearing wear, suggesting parents could have been bringing softer, higher protein food to their children than they themselves ate. Yeah, it's astonishing that we were able to discover that, or at least specifically these two paleontologists, other paleontologists. So, um, yeah, evidence that I mean, this makes sense. These youngsters are going to need much higher quantities of nutrients compared to the adults because they're having to grow and also to an extent quite rapidly, especially in the earlier stages. But it's likely that it would have taken possibly 15 to 25 years for these animals to fully or become fully grown and still likely continue to grow just at a much slower rate throughout their lives. So, today, this behavior is typical of birds whose young are confined to the nest for a time after hatching. Well, the difference is for many species of birds, not all of them, but many species, that they tend to be fed insects, amphibians, reptiles. There are certain species that, for the most part, that they're really only feeding on different species of plants and as well as different species of seeds, and you could say occasionally nuts. But yeah, it probably isn't necessarily a bad thing to compare the birds of today with these hadrosaurs, though I would think it might be a bit easier as long as it's a decent climate. They're not going through a dry season for the adults to bring over hundreds of pounds, or you could even say hundreds of kilograms of vegetation. So maybe thousands of pounds. If you're talking about well, hundreds or even more adults in a single area. Actually, probably wouldn't even take that many. So the urge for a bird to feed a youngster is a very old behavior. Oh, birds have also been around for around I know that was redundant, but 150 million years since the late Jurassic with Archaeopteryx over in Germany. So it's likely Archaeopteryx had a very similar feeding behavior, or when it came to supplementally feeding their young back in the Jurassic, like today's birds. So, what we're providing is that evidence for that behavior probably goes much further than the origin of birds, perhaps to the origin of dinosaurs. Oh, definitely. I think it could possibly go back to some of the first reptiles to exist during the Permian period, not the Permian period, the Carboniferous period over 315 million years ago. Now, let's bring up a one of those smaller species. So, Psittacosaurus, Psittaco. Okay. So this is one of the only species of ceratopsians that we found at least um, fragments of eggs, but I believe when it comes to Psittacosaurs, actually, we have found whole nests from them. I think I might be mistaking them
Is that
for
right?
yes, yeah, this is him. In fact, when it comes to coloration of this animal, the feather accumulation, this is fairly accurate. Um, these two animals were probably not much larger than 6 feet in length. They're pushing 1.8 meters and probably weighed how much more than 80 to 110 pounds, or pushing somewhere between 40 to 50 kilograms. Oh, yes. And they were likely, for the most part, bipedal. And they did coexist with also some of the largest mammals that inhabited the Mesozoic era, or the time of the dinosaurs. Um,
That one looks weird.
yeah, he is a bit off. Let's see if there are any others. Yeah, oh yeah, I think when it comes to Psittacosaurus, we have found not just the eggs, but I believe even the embryos of those eggs intact within the nest. Is that someone's drawing?
I don't see a signature, but maybe.
Or at least model? It is a bit off though. Yeah, that's a weird looking Psittacosaurus. The legs are completely like the body in general is just off centered. The face should be a bit more, I think, elongated somewhat, but also higher towards the top. He's also lacking feathers. I believe we do have oh, no, I think I see them. They're just very faint. Um,
Okay, this
his
guy has a full-blown beak.
okay, it's like the others. I made this guy, though. They give him very wide feet and very wide, even shins, like the skin membrane or even the muscle tissue is quite extended. I mean, I guess it's fine. And sort of like pudgy sort of
He looks like a
forearms.
cartoon bird.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's somebody's drawing. Um, hmm. This one's not bad. They did curve the sign horns to an extent. Oh, so Psittacosaurus lived over in northern China around 113 million years ago during the early Cretaceous period. So this is far before Nasutoceratops or Styracosaurs had evolved. Styracosaurus is another species of ceratopsian, as well as Albertosaurus and Maiasaura. Yeah, it's not a bad representation of a Psittacosaurus.
Kinda looks to me like he wants to play football or something.
Yeah, or it's supposed to be representing like he's facing off some predator or maybe another male Psittacosaurus, or it's a mother defending her nest. I guess you could say that Psittacosaurus does have somewhat quite long toes on its hind limbs compared to its body size. Just on the other picture, it looked quite wide. What was it? Oh, it is interesting because within the ceratopsians evolution, especially with the earlier species, many of them had more of like a theropod sort of a foot structure, or a carnivorous dinosaur like a carcharodontosaur, an allosaur. And then there was this massive change in their overall anatomy. And well, the weird thing is that when it comes to their forelimbs, their hands actually represent to an extent the forelimbs of the later species of larger ceratopsians, but their hind limbs or their hind feet were completely different and eventually would change into the more typical sort of almost hippo, somewhere between like a hippo and alligator like foot structure, which is odd, but also quite fascinating. When it comes to the other species of ceratopsian, it is the Protoceratops that We have found nests of over in Mongolia. That was around 71 million years ago. So after Maiasaura. At least at the moment, we haven't found any other ceratopsian nests. Um, we can leave the Albertosaurs there for a bit. So let's see. Juvenile Maiasaura pipilosorum likely ate more nutritious, low fiber foods. That sounds about right. Wow, that's almost like, yeah, many species of birds today. Like fruit, while their caretakers. Wait, what? Oh, wait, hold on a second. Low fiber foods like fruit. Fruit are high fiber plants or foods. Um, Something's wrong. What is he eating? Avocado? Pretty sure it hadn't existed yet. Or sea buckthorn? I don't know. Let's see. So while their caretakers consumed a greater proportion of tougher, nutritionally poor high fiber plant parts. Nutritionally poor. Wait a second. Okay, juveniles consumed more nutritious, low fiber foods, but their caretakers, their parents, consumed nutritionally poor, high fiber plant parts. I think
Care
what's trying to say is poor protein, high fiber plant parts.
caretakers,
Oh, wait a second.
really?
Um, yeah, it's very possible that even the hadrosaurs might have had both parents taking care of them, or at least the mother might have been taking care of the young. But just odd, it just says caretaker. Um, Now maybe you could be referring if the hadrosaurs had a more of like a matriarchal society like elephants. So you had not including the lead female, but you have several aunts, grandmothers, older sisters helping taking care of the young. I think that's one of the only times I've heard of the term caretakers. Um, but even then, if you're thinking of like a deer, I'm thinking more of like a deer sort of a society. So something like caribou or reindeer, even elk. So, or moose, it's a bit different. But I guess you could say one thing that's a bit common with those specific animals is that they will actually give birth in um, a quiet distance from each other. They don't like being around other individuals. They like to be specifically by themselves for a short period of time. Lions will actually do this as well, but they will stay away from the pride for several weeks. Whereas for the caribou, it's for maybe a couple hours or so, at least after the birthing takes place. I have to double check on that. But anyway, that was weird. I'm guessing poor protein, high fiber plant parts. I wonder why. In mammals today, the same patterns of shearing wear would likely be present in grazers like horses, antelopes, and cows, while low fiber diet eaters like tapirs would have dental patterns similar to the young dinosaurs. Um, yeah, I have to take a look into that.
Wait, to peers? Really? To peers?
Well, it's not hitting me what specific wetland plants, especially that the tapirs are feeding on over in Brazil, Ecuador, certain parts of Uruguay or Paraguay in South America. Okay, if you're talking about South American tapir, then there's the Malaysian tapir over in Malaysia, Singapore, um, Thailand that also feeds on different aquatic plants. But I have no idea when it comes to. I'm not really familiar with the species at the moment, but more or less their nutrition content. Let's keep going. In this instance, oh wait, in comparing the types of wear on dinosaur teeth, the researchers also suggested that shifts in diet may have also performed an important role in early growth and development. Oh yeah, definitely. Same thing happens for many different types of mammals, reptiles, amphibians today, birds, sharks. In this instance, their results show that the diet of juvenile Maiasaura pipilosorum may have caused them to grow particularly fast in their first year. Well, I would assume you did. I mean, they would have to. They are tiny at this point. I mean, about the size of a well, a little bigger than a football, but, when they're first born, you have to remember that they're curled inside the egg. The scientists also consider other interpretations of their results instead of consuming completely different fair dinosaur pattern or parents. Could have been feeding their young partially regurgitated food, another behavior now common in birds. Oh, that actually didn't hit me with the herbivores. I would think of maybe certain carnivores doing that. Even then, sometimes just giving them the freshly killed animal, but that might make more sense. Wouldn't it be something similar to what you see in African painted dogs, wolves, well, animals like lions, tigers, and cougars, lynx, not so much. But I'm also looking at by a carnivore perspective. But also, you have to remember these animals did not suckle their young, so um, hmm, that is a big question. It's very possible. Yeah, the herbivores could have regurgitated plant food for them, and also plants are a lot harder to digest. The fermentation just simply might make more sense. Alternatively, juveniles could also have left the nest to forage for themselves, an activity now seen in modern herbivorous lizards. Oh yeah, okay, those guys. Hmm. This may be like iguanas because iguanas are herbivorous, and that also is a much older theory. It's possible for this to have occurred for the juveniles. I think the regurgitation might be a bit more recent. Both are certainly possible. I think the regurgitation also because of how tough the plants are in order the youngsters' system has to work much harder to obtain those nutrients. So the regurgitation might or probably fits better. Um, looks a bit more like this AI picture looks more like an Ammontosaurus to an extent. At least when it came to the skull, somewhat. Who else did I want to bring up? Oh, okay. Saurolophus. Let's bring him into the picture. Saurolophus. Now, Saurolophus does not belong to the same lineage of hadrosaurs that Maiasaura and who was it? Hypacrosaurus belong to. The Saurolophus, along with Parasaurolophus, which are two completely different species, belong to the Saurolophini lineage of hadrosaurs. And when it comes to Sauroloph well, this is Parasaurolophus. We can still leave him up here, but need just Saurolophus. It should have a very small, short, like thin crest towards the back of its head. Not a curled one either, just a somewhat straight, maybe tilted up somewhat. Um, but Saurolophus also over in Mongolia. There we go. This animal was one of the largest species of hadrosaurs to exist. There was a species of Saurolophus over in Alberta, Canada, but it was a dwarf, or at least compared to the Mongolian species. The Alberta type was only about 3 tons. The Mongolia type could reach somewhere around 9 to 11 tons. It was a massive hadrosaur. So yeah, I believe the individual on the far right is the Alberta specimen. Not sure about the one in the middle. I think that might be a debated Saurolophus species, but that's likely the Mongolia specimen on the bottom. Now, these animals also had a very different overall morphology from the hadrosaurs, at least when looking at the skull and even the forelimbs. At least the members of Lambeosaurinae in North America. I believe there were certain ones also in Asia, possibly like the Lusatitan, but or even Barspoldia. Saurolophus, however, it had a much more duck bill, you could say, compared to other species of hadrosaurs, even like in Mosasaurus. I'd say they're Their bills are not as robust. They're a bit smoother, and they're just simply not as well equipped for coming into contact with maybe a harder surface, unlike certain members of the Lambeosaur lineage. But when it comes to Saurolophus, we have found certain egg fragments of Saurolophus over in a specific part of the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and it looks like they might have had a somewhat green blue sort of a tint to them. So it's we looks like we have evidence that even dinosaurs had different types of colored eggs, much like with what we see in a variety of different species of birds today. Um, it's likely also due to the feeding behavior of Saurolophus is what causes these specific colors in or on the eggshells. And this also seems to happen with many species of birds today, depending on what they're feeding on. It will change the colors of the eggs. It can actually even change the color of the yolk too. Um Probably depicting maybe a Nemectosaurus in some sort of a lake over in Cretaceous Mongolia, but Saurolophus existed before Nemectosaurus, or at least right before the sauropod evolved. So
Okay,
this
what's
was
with this thing?
no wait, yeah, Saurolophus I think was somewhere between 75 to 81 million years ago, much older than that Titanosaur. This is one of those National Geographic, um, early 2010s models.
Look like a horse.
Yeah, it's very off. The arms are not in proportion with the, um, just overall front of the core of the animal. The neck is far too thin. Saurolophus actually had a quite robust neck for many species of hadrosaurs. Quite similar also to, like, Parasaurolophus, though Parasaurolophus might have had a longer neck. The legs are far too thin as well. They would have been they would have had much more, musculature, and the toes, those were some of the shortest toes I've seen on a hadrosaur. What was this 1998? Huh, it's not bad, also for the time. I believe also Saurolophus is what Ducky in The Land Before Time is supposed to represent, as well as her, mother and then the other members of the group. That confused me for years. I'm like, "What is this? It looks familiar, but it's definitely not a Parasaurolophus. It's not a Montosaurus. It's too small," and then it finally hit me in recent years that it was a Saurolophus. Um, yeah, but I say it's not bad. It's just, that could possibly represent a youngster. Okay, so, while that solution is less likely as juveniles were helpless and probably dependent on their parents to feed them during the first weeks after hatching, learning more about the remains can widen scientists' perspectives of what sophisticated biological and social systems dinosaurs may have had. The further back in time you go, the less of a fossil record you have. So, paleontologists have to draw from different sources of inspiration from different parts of the living. Oh, well, I mean, you're only referring to the late Cretaceous. So, I just simply say that there's a wide variety of other species of hadrosaurs we possibly just haven't found the other nests of. Also, we probably haven't looked into the enamel as into depth as, let's say, we have of these or this specific species. When it comes to a wide variety of different species of dinosaurs, I think there are certain other species, like even the titanosaurs, that we have evidence for specific families of plants that they were feeding on, possibly even specific species in general, referring to large sauropod dinosaurs. But um, unless it's just comparing with other animals, I think it's a bit of an odd comment. So, even among closely related dinosaurs, there's probably still quite a bit to learn about them. And also, it doesn't look like when it comes to Tyrannosaurs in general, like Albertosaurus, it's an Allosaurus, that these animals, or at least we haven't found any nests of them. We have found embryos, it looks like, at least intact embryos of certain, actually, might have been It's not hitting me what specific tyrannosaurs, but indicating that they were a bit larger compared to certain other animals around the same size or even larger, which is quite interesting. Maybe something due to the high protein diet. Trying to think of other dinosaur groups in which we found the nests of certain prosauropods and sauropods. If possible, future studies could examine other fossils of the very youngest dinosaurs for dental microwear to test other hypotheses regarding dinosaur embryos and hatchlings. Also, when it comes to those ceratopsians, like what were their young feeding on as well, but not just the youngsters, even the adults, the juveniles that we have found, like of Montsaurus or certain other horned ceratopsian dinosaurs, would be good to see. So, thanks for joining. And for Prehistoric to Presence, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guy Live Daily News. And remember, we are streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. Nothing is better than all animals, all